Markus, man, thank you so much for making it.
Yeah.
Super appreciate making the time,
absolutely.
riding over, and thank you, bro.
Yeah.
So if you want to introduce yourself to everyone listening,
Sure.
and take it
Yeah,
away.
absolutely. So I lead the brand strategy discipline at IBM. I'm relatively new in the role. I've been there for about 7 months. Prior to that, led brand strategy for Messenger. Have also had some growth roles at Samsung. And before that was at RGA, leading the Samsung account, AKQA, where we built digital products for Verizon. And then prior to that, Interbrand, doing a lot of global brand strategy for AT&T, Hertz, and some global companies. I know we got some stories sort of teed up from those days.
Yeah, definitely. I know you mentioned at IBM, it's all B2B now, right?
Yeah.
So what kind of projects are you targeting? What clients are you really targeting to, and projects are you working on?
Yeah, so with IBM, you have this 100-year-old brand that has been involved in helping the Apollo shuttles get off the ground. So we have this legacy, but at the same time, we're also building quantum computers. We're leading in AI. And we're trying to figure out, how do we tell our story so that the average consumer can understand? And when I say consumer, I mean this B2B consumer. And so we've really narrowed our focus on AI for business as well as hybrid cloud solutions. And so for me, this is a bit of a transformation, as I've been more of a consumer-focused marketer. Yeah. But at the same time, I really balk when people start to make the differentiation between B2B marketing or B2C marketing, because the reality is, like, people are people at the end of the day. And so a lot of what you're doing, if you're talking about, say, top of funnel marketing or mid funnel marketing, is going to be the stories that you're telling and those narratives that are ultimately going to be compelling. So specifically to IBM, it's how do we help tell the story of who we are, the fact that we do research, technologies, as well as consulting in a consistent manner. How do we bring case studies to life, be it the partnerships we have with the Masters, be it some of the work that we do with Wimbledon, be it the work we do with the Grammys, or work with sovereign nations who are trying to figure out, how are we building AI into our government services, or a company like Pepsi trying to figure out, what does AI mean for us?
With the amount of work that you do in different projects and different industries that you guys service, what are some of your tasks or like your day-to-day roles in your current position?
Yeah, so I think one of the big pieces, we have over 650 products in the IBM portfolio. And so a truly classic brand strategy task of, how do you simplify that? How do you make it easier for clients to navigate us as an organization? So we're doing a lot of work as it relates to our brand architecture, thinking about the different business units that we have. How can we tighten up our offering? How can we tell those stories cohesively? We also have a large event strategy. So how do we show up when we are at Dreamforce? How do we think about showing up when we're at a partnership with Rethink, so AWS? What are those key messages that we want to have across those moments? Another thing that, into the nitty gritty, naming. So if you have 650 products and you're going to have to make something specific for, let's say, Android versus iOS, you're going to have to name things slightly differently. Some's going to have high volume, some's going to have low volume. So you get this proliferation of names. Then the fun part is I get to work really closely with the Blue Studio, which is our in-house creative studio, thinking about the brand writ large. So how does the brand come to life from an experience standpoint, be it in the digital products that we have, in the event spaces that we create, in office spaces. So just talking about, if we are a brand that stands for these core values, what does that feel like? What does that manifest as? Another day could be working with an agency to try to figure out a creative brief for a new campaign we're launching, right? So it really runs a gamut.
So it's still internal work as well. So it's not just external. It's not just B2B. It's your role really sifts into everything. From internal, the way people feel, like when they're working for IBM, everything. That's crazy.
I think that's a testament to how the organization views the concept of brand. IBM being a place where design has played such a key role with the IBM 8-bar, the Rebus, all these kind of iconic assets. Design has a big seat at the table, which is really cool to see in a very much product sales-led organization. Design is really critical. And so because of that, the idea of brand and the value of brand has really been elevated. From my Interbrand days, this concept of the role that brand can play as an organizing function to help solve challenges, be with your external consumers, with your internal stakeholders, and making sure everybody's aligned on what it is that you're trying to create. Brand has a really interesting play in those moments because it is a bit agnostic as to, okay, well, I'm just going to be telling you about these product features. It's like, no, how does it make you feel? What is the experience of engaging with? Yeah, precisely.
But did you take a lot from Meta into IBM?
So that was my first brand side role.
Yeah.
There were a lot of learnings from my time at Meta that have helped me at IBM.
Yeah.
The first one that's just the biggest is understanding stakeholder management.
Yeah.
I was surprised when I went to Meta how much of a bias against agency folks there was. Right. And a lot of it really pertains to, I think, this concept of stakeholder management and really understanding how if you think it's going to take 6 weeks to get something done, you have to realize at an organization of that scale and that much pressure, it's probably going to take 2 to 3 times that amount.
Yeah.
Because there are just going to be so many people who want to weigh in, want to make sure the implications of what decision you're making has on their pieces of business to ensure alignment across the board. And I'm seeing that at IBM. We talk about moving at clock speed, but the reality, again, going back to if you have 260,000 employees, how do you make sure while moving at clock speed, you're bringing enough people along on that journey
to
progress?
Help you slow down a bit? Like coming from agency life where it's just like
breakneck.
Yeah.
I think you realize how to make really big change. It takes incremental movements and being okay and understanding that those are the steps I'm going to have to take to make sure we're able to get things done. You just accepted it. There's a quote Colin Powell, I think, said, and I'm sure it's just like an old Army saying, but slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Right.
And that's something that I've really thought a lot about is like, sure, it's going to take us a little bit longer to get it done, but if we do it slowly, but sort of smoothly, it's going to get through the organization rather than trying to rattle the cage and try to bring, no, we have to get this done tomorrow. And then next thing you know, this stakeholder over here who hasn't been involved in the process sort of throws a red flag and everything's derailed. That sort of incrementality, while brutal to admit, is what is required when you're working at these massive organizations.
Yeah, and when you work on the agency side, you can't really expect it or know it. I mean, sometimes you expect it when someone's going to come in from the left and just totally derail something.
Totally.
But when you're internal with your own brand, do you start to expect things from a certain people and you start to understand the team on a bigger scale?
You also start to realize I understand what these stakeholders' priorities are.
Yeah.
And because I know what their priorities are, I can cater the solution that we're delivering to make sure that we're aligning to, okay, I know Tom over here is really concerned with our sales funnel and how do we make sure that he's happy about that? And I know that Jen over here is really concerned with the impact this is going to have on social. And so we can sort of make sure to tell those stories to those individuals as we're bringing them along. The other thing too is never go into a room where you don't know the outcome. Right, you need to make sure that you've done the work to pre-sell before you get into the room so that you've already gotten all the necessary folks that when a question is asked, you know that you can look over there and say, remember when we talked about the sales funnel? And that person's able to support you. Remember when we talked about what this is going to do for social? And they're like, yeah, absolutely, right? So then that leader in the room who's trying to figure out, okay, are all my team aligned with this vision that they're putting forward, it's almost a slam dunk because the decision's been
made.
Go
deeper with that. Like, what do you mean pre-selling?
Yeah, so an example from the Meta days, we were talking about rebranding the Messenger brand. And this is ultimately before Facebook became Meta and a lot of things, a lot of priorities shifted. But one of the decisions that we made was instead of this rebrand being led by integrated marketing or say product design, it was going to be spearheaded by brand strategy with a partner from our internal creative studio, creative director, as well as a product designer from the product team. So in that trifecta, we had brand strategy, which is able to play neutral, saying, look, I want to create something that marketing is excited about just as much as product is excited about it. And within that, the three of us, we were able to then say, cool, product designer, your responsibility is making sure that everybody on the product team is aligned with whatever we're ultimately creating and excited about what we're doing. Creative director, you got to go to the internal creative folks and make sure that what we're doing is exciting for them. And my responsibility was make sure all the marketing folks were on the same time. And so by having these 3 different people who were managing the stakeholders across the board, when we would go into this like first round of reviews, we'd already
where all those stakeholders
would appear. We'd had already kind of like tested the waters with them. So I wouldn't want to call it a tissue session, but almost doing that kind of pre-sell so that they said, I know what I'm expecting. Yeah. So when they go in the room, they're not going to look at it and say, you guys are completely off the brief. This is nowhere near what we need to do.
Gotcha. So you actually have pre-conversations with each of those stakeholders?
Oh, absolutely.
Got you. Yeah. Okay. And what sort of questions do you ask?
What are your priorities? Like making sure, what is on your roadmap to make sure that we're building into whatever we're creating. The more you can have meetings be discussions versus okay, I'm going to go through this 10 slide deck for you.
Yeah.
Just the better outcomes are going to come.
And you feel like you skip a whole phase,
100%.
the introduction phase. You're jumping into something they're all familiar with.
Yeah.
And we're really like, okay, how do we all know where we're at. How do we actually develop this? And what do we want from this?
Exactly.
And so before Meta, it was all agency life for you. For how many years was that?
Gosh, over a decade was agency side in New York. Came to New York from Portland, Oregon, where I'm from originally, very much with the intent of putting up a lot of shots. Yeah. And what I mean by that is I think going to an agency is really your opportunity to practice your craft.
Yeah.
And my time, specifically at places like Interbrand and AKQA and RGA, really were that, where you were surrounded by other highly motivated individuals, either in your own craft, so for me, in strategy, or surrounded by FE winning creatives who were going to push you and were going to ask a lot of tough questions. But at the same time, you're going to be working for clients like Verizon, Samsung, AT&T, who have massive budgets. Yeah. And so when you throw an idea around, hey, let's do a campaign and partner with Star Wars, they're like, yeah, sure. We know who we can talk to over at Disney to make this happen. Yeah. And like that, those are just unique opportunities that if you have that, you got to just grab it with both hands and go for it.
Yeah. And so tell us some of your experiences at the agencies you're working at, RGA and that.
Yeah. So I'll tell the Star Wars story because it was a bit of a wonky one. So we had been asked by
and this is at RGA.
This is at RGA, yeah, by a rather mercurial CMO who I love dearly from Samsung to help with a campaign spot that another agency just wasn't landing the plane on. And so we had developed some really safe territories that were your sort of expected holiday spots. Nick Pringle, a genius ECD, and I'm sure you'd hate that I said his name because he'd credit a lot of other folks with it, came up with this zany idea for what if we anchored this story around a dog that looked like Chewbacca. And it was such an easy get where he described, so let's paint the picture. And of course, I like remember the setting where it was him and a couple other creatives and our account leads just spitballing this idea. And it got so much momentum over the course of like 24 hours that it became a deck. And the idea was simple. Dog looks like Chewbacca in a rescue center. Guy working there takes a photo of him. Photo goes viral. Yep. Rescue Chewbacca dog. Young kid sees this, wants this, convinces dad through throwing the photo onto his Samsung TV, his Samsung phone, his Samsung tablet, sort of all over the place. Finally go to the shelter to rescue Chewbacca dog. But of course, the twist is dog's already been rescued. Pan over to a cat that looks like Emperor Palpatine and the Imperial March starts playing, right? Like anybody who's a moderate Star Wars fan just gets it from that description that I gave you, right? And we built it out, sold the idea to the CMO. Because it's such an easy thing to grasp, he was like, we have to get this done.
Did you develop that from scratch, or did you sort of jump on a preconceived concept?
No, just came up with this randomly, right? It aligned with the fact there was a Star Wars film coming out. Yeah. And so we were like, we have to get this done. So reach out to our clients. They're falling all over, loving it. Yeah. They ask us to deck it up because we ultimately need to go to Disney and have a conversation with Disney, because the last thing you'd want with IP as important as Star Wars is for this to somehow derail what they're doing.
What time frame are we talking about? Before release of movie?
It was launch? Thanksgiving time when we launched the campaign. I want to say the film, I would guess the film must have come out in sort of like the Christmas time frame at that like end of year moment.
Okay, so you had a while.
So it was kind of like leading up into it. But the IP being as important, it ultimately needed to go to the director of the film to make sure that he was okay with the concept. And this was going to be such an expensive buy because we were going to be doing it with Disney, and we had to pay for the IP, we had to pay for all the media, that we needed to get them all on board. And so my boss, the head of the account, we had flown to Korea to like pitch it to the Samsung offices there, and they were like, yes, call all of our lead CMOs. So we're literally on the van back from the Samsung HQ, driving to Itaewon, the airport in Seoul, Korea, dialing up the CMO of Brazil, dialing up the CMO of Mexico, telling them the story, just like I'm doing. Like we didn't even have a deck or anything that we were sort of walking them through. We were just telling them, imagine this.
That call starts with explaining who the hell you are in the first place, how you got that person's number.
Yes, exactly. So, telling this story to them. And ultimately, like the campaign got shot. It was really, really done beautifully. Great production partner. We engaged a couple of folks within the company who are diehard Star Wars folks to ask them like, what are little Easter eggs that we could put in there to make sure if you're somebody who understands Star Wars, you would know that we had done our homework.
Yep. That's awesome.
But yeah, and then here I am at like Thanksgiving with some family, and we're watching TV, and literally the spot comes on. It's like the first time I saw it live, which was sort of one of those like fun moments where you're like, I remember when we first came up with this.
It all comes flooding back.
Like, yeah, and like all the steps we had to take to ultimately get to this point where it becomes reality. This is pretty wild.
What was the biggest challenge of that whole process?
We're working with Disney from just like an IP legal standpoint, right? So understanding how sensitive Star Wars is and knowing all the necessary folks that would need to sign off on it. Yeah. That was definitely the hardest part.
Right. And have you had times, like maybe not in this circumstance, but where the client is getting sort of more exhausted or a bit fatigued by the process and like they're cold feet about the whole concept, and you're like trying to just make something happen, impossible happen?
So many times. There's that moment where you've sold, let's say, one client on it, and this doesn't have to be like a cool creative output. It could be something as simple as like a direction you want to take with a value proposition. They hear from their superiors that the direction has changed and they get kind of cold feet. And you're like, no, but this is going to unlock so much stuff over here that we can do that's going to be really interesting and cool. But those are one of those moments where you have to not take it personal and just understand there's going to be context that's just above what you have an understanding of. And that's really that moment where that relationship that you have with either your client or you have with your boss, and you have to trust their judgment at times if the business is shifting, to listen to, reading the tea leaves and saying, okay, I understand what we're doing. That said, great ideas a lot of times stick in the back pocket. And I know some ideas that I've seen that have definitely been recycled that I had pitched to other clients that get made long after I'm gone with a different company.
I bet.
And you're like, oh, because it was such a good idea. It's definitely going to repitch. There's nothing wrong.
You mentioned working as a team before. Are the things you've learned to really value? And like, I'm not sure how big your team was at RGA or Meta. Yeah. But is it really just a few strong people at IBM?
So I've got a team of 12 now at IBM. Okay. We're at Meta is smaller. And then at different agencies, I had led teams of 14 to 4, right? So just sort of dependent on the situation. I think the piece that's really interesting is obviously the relationships that you have within your team, but it's almost even more important is the cross-functional relationships that you develop, because understanding that people have different skill sets and being able to play well with others, for lack of a better description, is really important. And I think the best teams were always the ones where there was an understanding from the jump. I know that you are an amazing creative, and I'm going to give you the space to deliver that. And I'm not going to feel like I need to jump all over it and try to rescue the creative because I'm a super smart strategist. In the same way that if I'm a creative, I almost want to push my strategist to get me the best, sharpest brief possible so that I can go out and do what I need to build.
That's super interesting. Right? I love that you broke that down. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's like, as you build out these teams, so let's say you have a market researcher, how do you make sure that they're feeling empowered to not only deliver their findings, but also try to uncover not only here's what I found, but also why I think it's interesting. Cool. Well, if they're able to do that, now you can hand that over to the planner, the strategist, whoever it is. They can translate it and shape it a bit more and say, I think there's a lot of richness and blue space if we were to go over here. And now the creatives can just go off and sprint. And that's that moment where everybody's sort of working together, and whatever creative is ultimately doing, the market researcher can hold them accountable and say, it's funny, look at this data. Nobody's really interested in that kind of language. And so now you have this, everybody's involved, everybody's pushing each other. That's ultimately where the best results. And I can say, I see that in my role at IBM, working with copywriters and designers in our Blue Studio. A lot of them also come from agency life. And so we have this kind of shared understanding of, hey, you want me to set up the brief? Happy to do that. You want me to come into a crit? Love to. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be looking at the creative director to say, hey, you help me understand, in the same way that I hope they'd have that same respect for my strategist. If we're saying, hey, this is the direction that we want to go, we've provided the right fodder, ask questions, push our thinking as much as possible. But like, let's each have our lanes that we want to stay in so that we can ultimately deliver the best work.
That's really interesting, because I'm just thinking about what makes a good team member or what makes a good team, but it's also like the how to lead a good team and like what do you need to put in place.
Yeah.
Initially, like finding people's strongest skill sets and yeah, making sure everyone that, you know, understands each other's skill sets as well.
Yeah. I think that helping people feel empowered is one of the most important things that you can do. And the first boss I ever had said to me, don't come to me with a blank sheet asking how to do something. Just try.
Yeah.
Just start moving, because
Yeah.
that'll help me understand the way that you're looking at
I
the
love
problem.
that.
And then we can sort of like course correct as if necessary. And to me, that was such great insight, because it gave me permission to just try things and
Yeah.
go out and explore and experiment. And that's one of the things I've always said whenever I've been building teams is, don't ask me what you can do, tell me what you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that's not what we need to be doing, let's course correct it as possible. But just that concept of ownership, I think for anybody, if you're the most junior person, to feel that ownership and know that when you do the work, you can present the work, like those I think are really critical things.
I think as a leader too, as a manager or executive producer, you also get more ideas that you didn't even think of that way too. Like even if you do have a concept in mind and you're not going to be too specific, too creative, because you do want to see what they can deliver. Sometimes, you'll get back results or just sparks of ideas that like, wait, we could pivot slightly that in a direction I had no idea about, didn't even think about.
Totally. Some of my and other great managers were the ones who let their juniors really shape the problem they wanted to have solved, but didn't tell them how to solve it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the juniors can go out and build whatever solution they want to create. And now that senior person can kind of look at it and be like, cool, let me show you a bunch of shortcuts that are going to help us get from this concept you were saying to where the end result we need to be even faster. And like, that's that beautiful sort of moment of leadership where you're like, that's what a leader can do. That's what a leader can unlock. The other piece I like to say is, don't solve the problem, create a system to solve it multiple times. And that's one thing that just takes time to build out, right? So
can you say that again?
Really so don't solve the problem, build a system to solve it multiple times. And the idea there is, and my boss, Stacy General at Meta, that was one of the tasks that she really said to me. And that was such great, helpful advice, because a lot of times you see the same problems come up again and again. So how do you build those systems where either they can be self-service for the individual who's running into it, or you know that there's a process in place for how you're going to solve this thing, which can then make getting to that solution that much quicker. That's
awesome. So from agencies, working with a lot of B2C. Well, you mentioned before, it's like the lines are currently blurred now. Like, it is B2B, but like you need to understand what B2C looks like in every form. So is there much, do you wish you could go back and work with more multiple brands?
Yeah. What I loved about the agency experience was being able to go and work on multiple brands and being like, today I'm talking about telcos, tomorrow I'm talking about financial services or credit cards. Another day I'm talking about athletic apparel. But when you're working particularly on the agency side, you're solving a problem for the client at the most basic. When the agency relationship is even stronger, you are now a true partner to them and thinking across all the different problems they're facing. But when you do get the opportunity to work brand side, you're actually trying to see what are the problems that exist there and how can I prioritize how we're going to solve those problems, and how can I build towards something, let's say 5 years down the road, where that's even better than what we are now.
What fulfills you most about the work that you do at IBM?
I love being close to creativity. And creativity at scale is such a wild concept. The best brands are art that just exists. And I saw something where the Pepsi-Cola sign in Long Island City was just deemed a landmark. How insane is that? As a billboard.
They couldn't get any more commercial than that.
There is a gigantic billboard that sits there that we've all collectively said, that's art, that needs to stay. And when you see something like that, Domino's Sugar Factory, you have created something that has connected with people and creates a statement for the skyline of one of the world's greatest cities. That's creativity, right? Like, that's creativity at its finest. And those opportunities, and IBM is another place where when I thought about going there and I was talking to some friends, they're like, if you think about tech companies, IBM is not the one people are going to go to first. But if you think about from a design standpoint and the role that the 8-Ball and Paul Rand has had, it's a place where design and brand have actually played a really big role. And as we're looking towards AI and we're looking towards quantum computing and what is that going to look like, how do you infuse creativity in those experiences? And that was the part that I was like, all right, I'm sold. This is exciting. This is going to be good.
That's awesome. Now I'm going to quickly, we got 10 minutes, so I'm going to smash through these rapid fire questions.
Yeah.
I'll try and keep them as fucking rapid fire questions because sometimes I start asking for. What dish do you cook best?
Oh, man. The easy answer and the rapid fire answer is breakfast. Saturday and Sunday mornings are kind of my zone. And that's going to be omelets, biscuits and gravy, pancakes, breakfast meats of various varieties.
You a croissant guy?
I mean, I'm not making my own, but I'm picking them up. Besides that, I'm sort of in charge of the grilling in the family.
Got you. What's your guilty pleasure?
Gummy bears, German Haribo.
Oh
stale. Love them.
Yep. Hell yeah. What's your pet peeve?
Slow walkers. Slow walkers in New York City.
So New York. Even me, like I haven't been here anywhere near as long as you've been here, but man, it kills me. What's your biggest weakness?
Friends inviting me to go skiing. So it's like, the weather is terrible.
Yep.
We're going to drive 7 hours to middle of nowhere, Vermont.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah, let's wake up at 3:30 in the morning and go do that.
Yep.
And now on the flip side, if somebody's like, let's wake up at 7 a.m. to get breakfast or go do the gym before work. Yep. I'm like, yeah, there's no way I can do that. But some ridiculous opportunity to go skiing, I'll go out of my way to make it happen.
Nice. What's your biggest strength?
Providing and creating space for people to be successful.
I love that. That's great. Now, when you were 12 years old, what did you want to do with your life?
I wanted to be a professional basketball player and play for the Portland Trailblazers.
You got the height, right?
That's 6'2".
Yeah, I mean, isn't that half the battle?
Half the battle. Definitely could have used a little more if I wanted to be in the NBA.
What's your morning routine?
Right now, with a 1-year-old, it's a lot different. So wake up at 7.
So what's their routine? I should say.
Exactly. It's waking up at 7. My wife and I grab the little guy. One of us will change him. The other one will start making coffee and breakfast, feed him right away, play with him for about 45 minutes, and then get my day started.
If you couldn't work in this industry, what profession would you pursue?
I think I'd be in a sales role, and I don't know what that would be. And the reason I say that is my dad was a sales guy, was a manufacturer's rep, and he would always describe himself as, I'm just a lowly peddler. Yeah. And he was just a storyteller. And I think a lot of times that's what sales really is it's all about the stories that you're telling and the relationship that you build with people.
Did falling into this industry of marketing and advertising, did you start to appreciate sales more and commerce more?
Totally. The great piece of creative gets somebody inspired to just want to be connected with a brand.
Yeah.
The concept of the Nike posters of there is no finish line to celebrate runners wasn't about the features of the Nike shoe. Exactly. It was just a mantra. I saw something, and I'm going to butcher it, but I was biking home and I saw a campaign that Arc'teryx, it was the first brand campaign that Arc'teryx had put out here in the city, out of home campaign, no wasted days. And the reason that spoke to me, again, growing up in Portland, Oregon, where it's raining all the time, you had to go outside to play. It was not like a negotiable. Like my mom was like, goodbye. Like you're out in the cul-de-sac, you're playing basketball in the rain, whatever. And as I was biking home wearing some rain shell, I just was thinking so much about how connected I felt with that concept. And again, this is not about buying their Atom jacket. It is about just the concept of what they want to be. And that's that moment where if you can create that at a marketing level, this is really fucking up the idea of a rapid fire question, so apologies.
This is what I mean. There's always a follow-up. It's either from you or me.
So it is that moment where if you're able to create that connection from a marketing standpoint, the sales are going to happen, and they're going to fall out because you're able to do that. It's just going to be natural that you want to be part of that. You want to be connected to that tribe.
Mm-hmm. That happened with me completely. It was like, okay, no, I love the creativity because I was originally a music producer, which to an extent was purely customer relations, working with artists, but purely creative to an extent. And then get into photography and videography. I love this, purely creative. Start dealing with clients, start realizing their challenges, their goals, and how do you satisfy that, and then falling in love with just how to win in this, which is how to sell more, but also by representing the brand long term, how do you sell more
and sell more means almost the opportunity to make more work that gets out there, and not to pat yourself on the back, but more just this is cool because we're making art and we're putting it out there and it's being experienced by people. And it's funny.
That's true experience. I love that. Yeah.
And like that, so I wrote this little blurb on LinkedIn about No Wasted Days, and I had multiple people from Arc'teryx like send me messages being like, "Hey, thanks for writing this. Like, it really meant we worked really hard on this. It meant a ton." And I was like, "No, thank you for doing it. Like, thank you for battling internally because I know it was probably not easier for you to say we're going to have a campaign. It's going to just say 3 words. That's it.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of guts, and being able to sell that through. Like, kudos to those guys and gals for making it happen.
All right, next question. Before.
Yeah.
What's the biggest learning experience you've ever had?
Losing my pops.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a really big moment of just the transition. I'm an only child.
Yeah.
And
Same.
the relationship with my mom, the relationship with my wife, just, what does that look like? A lot of learning from an experience like that.
That's a dark way to end this.
Maybe there's like another
that was the last. Yeah, what's one more question? Yeah. What's one thing that you regret spending money on?
Ooh. I'm sure there are many things.
I love that answer already because everyone just says, I really can't think of anything.
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. Well, I mean, probably try to all like push it out. I want to give you like a very specific thing, but I feel like things that I'm always frustrated about. You buy a piece of clothing on sale and you were excited about it because it was such a screaming deal.
Yeah.
And then you finally wear it for like the first or second time and you're like, I don't really like this. I think I just bought it because it was on sale.
You're speaking to, like, I do that shit every week. Because I'm sucker for a sale. So I'm always like, I just love it. I got to have it.
60% off.
Yeah.
I need it. And then you're
I'm making money by buying it. Like,
absolutely. If I don't buy this, it is a failure of my own. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I don't know if you saw this, but I'd love for you to ask a final question to the audience to wrap things up. Did you prepare something?
I have something that I'd love to know. I think the piece that I'm curious about is, in the same way that I talked about No Wasted Days, what are those campaigns that you can think about that are, that stick out in your mind and that get you excited and feel almost more like art than marketing? Because I think there's I just am curious to see what are the other people are.
So what resonated with them? Yeah, love that. That is everything I wanted to go through today. You're amazing. Super insightful. I got to get your number because I've got 101 other questions that I want to ask you. But thank you so much again for making it on a Friday afternoon. And bro, that's it.
Awesome. Thank you.